All right, let's get started. That's it? Those are the only people who didn't realize that this is not the Wix headless. It's the other headless, the real headless, the web headless. All right, headless components, off with their heads. The rise of headless components. What the hell are headless components anyway? Don't worry, we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about what the hell headless components are, why you should care, how to best use them, and we're going to do all of that by looking at examples of popular Omry certified recommended libraries that are out there. If there is time, I'm also going to tell you about our experience with headless components at Codax. Hi everyone. I'm Omry. I'm a coder and a tinkerer, and I love building stuff, and I love breaking stuff, and I love building new stuff from the broken pieces. And I've solved problems using code, using chainsaws, typically creating much more serious problems in the process. Oh, and speaking of bigger problems, I'm also heading the engineering of Codax, which is a beautiful thing that Wix does. Did you know that? This is Codax. I'm going to be using that to show the examples. It is a visual IDE, which means you can edit React components in isolation. It's awesome. It doesn't intrude into your code. It's an IDE. You edit your code, and you can do it either visually or in conjunction with code. Bring in your own libraries, whatever way coding standards you're used to. It just makes things nicer. All right, so we focused on building an IDE for React components because components are great, right? They're the best way that we have at the moment to build applications. There are other ways, right? They're just not as good, and we didn't find the next thing yet. And I'm talking about applications because applications, that's the thing that pays the bills, right? Components are just a way to get there. And I know this is Wix, and some of you actually get paid to build components. That's great. But components are bringing in the money to pay your salaries. Okay, we're going to take a little break from all this tech talk. I want you to meet Chad. Chad. Come on, Chad. This is Chad Giga. He is a bright, handsome junior developer. And he was tasked with building a Google Docs clone. Now, Chad is looking at it, and specifically he's focusing on this menu. And because he is a junior developer, he's asking himself, how hard can it be? Now, pro tip, if you're asking yourself or anyone else, how hard can something be, you're a junior at that something. A pro would instantly recognize that it's impossible, and you're an idiot for asking. So Chad is looking at this menu, thinking, how hard can it be? I mean, the HTML and CSS are trivial, right? The state is super simple, right? A menu can be open or closed. Menu has items. Items go click. This is pretty much it. So Chad is already starting to build his menu, and then he remembers that someone told him about accessibility and, right, resizing. Oh, and Z-index and overflow and oversized items and keyboard navigation and all right. The scope of this menu just exceeded the scope of the project. So Chad is realizing that he's going to have to commit to a component library. Component libraries, aren't they great? You all know them, you love them, you hate them, some of you are building them. They span a wide spectrum, which is also a component library by Adobe. It spans a wide spectrum from copy pasta to stuff that integrates into a build toolchain. And they all have the same basic premise, which is learn our way of doing business, and you'll be able to build beautiful UI very quickly. And the good ones really do deliver. So Chad is building. Oh my God, I'm going to meet the deadline for the first time in the history of software development until he crashes into the customizability wall. So before I mansplain customizability wall, by show of hands, who already crashed into it? All right. Funny, anyone in Core 3 already crashed into the customizability wall? What a coincidence. Uh, all right, so let me explain how it looks like from the outside looking in. So you, as a developer, promised your PM or customer a solution for the problem. It's going to be like bespoke business logic, accessible through beautiful, unique design. And it's kind of down the road during the project, your chosen component library is having a fight with the uniqueness of your design. This could be as simple as the design calls for one rounded corner, and your component library is only allowing for corner radius, which affects all the corners. So, and you know what the worst thing about it is? This stuff is not even on the spec. Nobody gives a damn about component libraries except us nerds, right? The PM doesn't know about component libraries, and they don't want to know. So maybe I'll explain by looking at some code samples. This, by the way, is Codex. Wow. I'm going to switch to preview mode, and I chose end design menu because like menu is such a basic component. Like it's been probably debugged a million times and been used by so many applications. And end design is one of the better component libraries out there. It's really like established, documented, and this is menu. It's so basic, right? So I'm looking at, oh, whoops. This is not a bug. This is just rehearsing too much. So this is the way a menu works. You hover over it, you see the option, and they're grouped. And my design calls for this lovely icon for the group A and option 1. So looking at the data that generates this menu, I'm just going to copy and paste the icon onto the group A and option 1. All right? So already we can see that TypeScript is warning me that something is not right. And indeed, when I hover over the menu, we can see that there is no problem with option 1, but no icon for group A. Why is that? Because when the end design publishers just didn't think that any reasonable design would call for an icon for the group for whatever reason. So I chose end design because I think it's good. This is not a bug of end design. No. This is a feature of components. If you want a component, you want isolation, encapsulation, right? And encapsulation means whatever you didn't expose can't be customized. So even if we look at the most trivial example, which is this amazing component right here, which I crafted myself, it's a div wrapping a span, wrapping a text, okay? If I want to customize the span of the word encapsulation, what do? I mean, I can use the existing class name and say, craft like a CSS rule saying class name child span, but that's breaking encapsulation from the other side, right? Now I'm completely dependent on the internal structure of this component. Alternatively, I can do the right thing and add something like, I don't know, span class name, apply it in the right place, span class name. Wow, what an upgrade. All right, so, and you can see, and you probably already experienced this, when you have a component that's non-trivial, this list goes on and on and on and on. Eventually, you get to the point where you don't even know what the internal language means, like what do you actually customize it when you applied a certain class or variable. So, unfortunately, if you have a default view and you want to keep encapsulation, which you want to keep encapsulation, you probably have a customizability wall hiding somewhere in your component. The only way to avoid that issue is to not have a default view at all. And this is exactly what headless components are. And we are 9 minutes into the talk and already made it to the topic of the talk. So headless components don't include HTML, or they include very basic HTML that is designed to be replaced. And they include no styling whatsoever. And you might be thinking, why is that good? Well, it's good because all of the hard work was done, and it's hidden away, abstracted away into a library. All you have to do now is the easy part. You express the view in HTML and CSS, the language you know how to describe your views with, right? All the hard work abstracted away, hidden away, And they come in two flavors, headless components. There is JSX-based approach, which wraps the functional pieces with HTML tags, JSX tags, and take children, snippets of view as children, and you have a hook-based API, which means you call a hook, you get back properties, objects that you can spread onto HTML elements of your choice. Let's look at some examples. Radix. Okay, Radix is my favorite headless library. Really nice APIs. They focus on primitives, and the API looks something like this. So this is a popover. You click on it, and there is some content. Let's look at how the code looks like. Right. So, is this big enough? Can you see the code? Great. So, we have the component here. It has a root. It has a bunch of functional subcomponents. And within them, we can see the HTML snippets. That's the only view. And they have a really nifty trick here, where they have this Boolean property called asChild. If asChild is added, this chunk of view will replace the default view. So there is a default button, and you can put in the content. But if you want your specialized button, you don't need to wrap it with a div or a button. You just use asChild. I think it's a very elegant API. And by the way, so Radix comes without view by default. But if you want to save time and you want something more like Material UI or InDesign or whatever, then check out shadcn, shadcn.ui. It is a project built on top of Radix, which kind of lets you, now they move to PLI, but it's basically copy-pasta of default views on top of Radix. So why is that different than Material UI? Well, it's copy-pasted. You can edit it, right? If something is not customizable, change the HTML. You don't need to do a PR. The process is immediate, and you can see it right in your IDE. All right. Next, we have React Aria. React Aria is the second type of API. So it's hook-based. It is a richer library. It has more components. So Radix is much more about the fundamentals, the primitives. It does have some interesting stuff in it, but you're not going to find galleries and calendars and stuff like that. For that, you need to look into React Aria. React Aria, by the way, it's an interesting use case because it's part of the Adobe Spectrum design system. Adobe sells a design system which includes everything, DX files, guidelines, and an implementation in React, which is built on top of React Aria. So they made a very interesting architectural choice to build a headless component library and add the heads to it, right? I think it's actually kind of brilliant. Let's look at the API. So this is a simple search field. When the user clicks, we have this nice button that clears the search. Okay. It looks kind of like that. Let's edit the component. Oops, sorry. Oh, I'm in preview mode. Let's edit the component. And you can see that we have this hook, search field. Okay, we give it, we'll talk about that in a second. And you get back all these props. These props can be spread. And I think that's also kind of elegant, right? You can spread on whatever HTML you want. And they include everything you need. Accessibility, Aria, event handlers, whatever. What's nice about it is that there is, I don't know if it's nice. It's just there's no default component, right? This search field, we define it. All we get is the hook. We define every part of the view, which means we can actually put this button on a different page. Couple of things to notice about this type of API, or at least the Aria implementation, the React Aria implementation. One thing is that they're really into refs. So if you don't like refs and you're worried about the performance overhead, I don't know, it's a point to check. And it brings another library, another open source under the hood of Spectrum library, which is called Stately. It manages states. It's the ugly sister of React Aria. Okay, I'm going to show you one more example. It's quite a different example. So, any of you ever used Tanstack? Nice. React Table, AGGrid? Right, so AGGrid is a data grid. It's very advanced. It's commercial. This is the open source alternative. And as you can guess, it's very sophisticated, right? We have a ton of functionality, like the dynamic fields. We can update the data live. We can change the column order. A ton of functionality. So how would we describe that, and why would we do it in a headless way? Well, Tanner Lindsley, the creator of React Table, who's also on Codax's advisory board, gave a great talk about that in React Summit, I think 2 years ago. And he explained a lot of reasons why he took his very popular library and moved it from, I guess, headful to headless API. And he talked about everything I covered and more. And I'm going to just take one thing from his talk that is super interesting to me. If we have something that is this rich in functionality, and is this customizable, like you saw the data, you can imagine how much stuff you would want to customize in a data grid. It's enormous, right? How many pages of documentation would you as a reader have to read before you get to the interesting stuff? I mean, it's endless. It's very hard to find the focus. And if you think, yeah, but I can put it on the first page of the docs website, what about code completion, right? So when we go in headless, and I'm going to show you how it looks like. So we have the hook that generates the table, and the table is really just a bunch of APIs, right? So we have get all leaf columns, and we map them onto whatever we want, really, okay? But typically into a table. And when you look at this code, it looks quite intimidating at first, right? We're mapping and this and that. But this is a very sophisticated piece of kit, right? This is a sophisticated component full of functionality. Of course, the API is going to be more involved. But when you break it down, what do we have here? Getters, setters, a hook. Everybody knows that stuff, right? It maps, everybody knows about mapping, into HTML, which we all know and love. Or hate, it doesn't matter. We know it. So by skipping all of the customizability options for React Table and allowing us to just map APIs onto code snippets, it simplifies everything, and it makes the knowledge you already have transferable into using React components. And also, like, the code completion is nice and concise. You only get the interesting functional bits. So you might be thinking, it sounds cute, but isn't that just theming with extra steps? Well, I would say, yeah, it is. If you're building a POC, it's not the fastest way to go. But for real-life applications, not all applications, but for many of them, especially if it's B2C, we have a unique design. And the unique design, you know how, like, who here worked with, like, I don't know, Material UI? Right. You know how after a while, when you work with Material UI, you can instantly recognize every Material UI application out there? Right? The inkwell, the little touches, it feels kind of the same. So if you want a unique design, you need to customize the hell out of it. It's going to take at least as much code as writing the HTML from scratch. I'm not talking about the functionality, just the view. So in that sense, if you actually want if you're aiming for a unique design, it's not going to add work. And again, you can transfer your skills from other projects. You can onboard team members more easily. And I would say there's another reason why it's not more work. If you work like me, you want to build very quickly, iterate with the customer, see what makes the cut, right? And only do the fit and finish for features that are actually going to be shipped into production. So you're going to crash into the customizability wall really late in the project. And you're going to have a dilemma, a tough dilemma, right? Are we going to compromise the quality of the design, the quality of the code? Because sure, we can work around this. Like we can reverse engineer and design, we can fork it, there are solutions. But they're going to be ugly. They're going to be different than the ways we customize everything else in the code. So are we going to compromise the design, the code, or the budget? Those are our choices, and it's not a nice dilemma. For me, mitigating that is well worth the hassle of writing some HTML. So quickly, a few lessons learned at Codex. So first off, if you like what you saw and you want to check it out, know that you can mix and match. These libraries are optimized as hell. They're tree shakeable. You can just take one, see how it feels, and kind of commit as you learn to love it. Headless components stay cleaner for longer. I think it's psychological more than anything. All of the business logic is completely, like, all of the functional behavior of the component are in the library. They're not in the code. So as a developer, nobody wants to be the one that ruined the elegance of a stupid element, right? Nobody wants to be the first to introduce the first line of business logic. So there is a nice Rails there that psychologically keeps the code cleaner for longer. And lastly, stand on the shoulders of giants. We have these libraries out there. We built our own. It's shit. But we didn't have Radix at the time. By the time we were ready to go to like an open source, the project, Radix was already out. It's better. Use it. React Aria, okay. I'm not super psyched about their API, but they're good. And Tanstack is amazing. And these are very responsive communities, very active. There are a lot more libraries that I didn't show you because they're not good enough or not active enough, but these, give them a try. All right, why did I choose this topic? I think there's a huge opportunity here, both to build a reputation for yourself, for your company, for Wix. There is a gap in this market. You don't find a lot of galleries. You don't find a lot of interesting calendars, advanced forms. There is a lot of like mid to advanced and specialized components that the community is hungry for, and you can fill in the void. And secondly, like looking at what Adobe did with Spectrum, it's a great way to build components, even internally, even if we're going to customize them to ship them to our own teams. And I guess that's that. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm here.